It all began with something innocent, a child's lost tooth and a late-night surprise. But within hours, that tiny moment spiraled into a thunderous clash between Elvis Presley and Priscilla that no one saw coming. What could possibly turn a sweet gesture into a fiery confrontation? And what did Elvis say that left even his closest family speechless? This isn't hearsay. It comes straight from someone who was there, someone who knew the king like few others ever did. Stay with us, because the truth behind that night will leave you stunned. After Elvis and Priscilla parted ways in the early 70s, their daughter Lisa Marie found herself splitting time between two very different worlds. But there was something magical, almost surreal, about her stays at Graceland. While most kids spent their holidays watching cartoons or playing in the yard, Lisa's childhood memories unfolded inside one of the most iconic homes in America. Behind the gates of Graceland, far from the spotlight and flashing cameras, she wasn't a Presley. She was just a little girl with boundless energy and a flair for trouble. Every school break, Lisa would return to her father's mansion with a spark in her eyes and a mischievous grin. With Elvis sleeping through most of the daylight hours and the staff bustling quietly to maintain order, Lisa had the run of the place. She'd sneak around corners, burst into rooms with laughter, and cook up harmless pranks that only a child surrounded by freedom and fame could imagine. There was an unfiltered joy in the way she moved through those long halls, a kind of playful rebellion that made her both adorable and, at times, a handful. And watching it all unfold was someone who knew Elvis better than most, his cousin Billy Smith. Billy didn't just visit Graceland, he lived there, tucked away in a trailer on the estate grounds. As the last living member of the original Memphis Mafia, Billy saw everything. He watched Lisa grow up inside the heart of rock and roll royalty, often shaking his head with a smile at her antics. He wasn't just a bystander, he was part of the story. And what he saw during one seemingly ordinary visit would later become one of the most unforgettable moments behind Graceland's closed doors. Life at Graceland didn't follow the usual rules, especially when Elvis Presley was involved. The king of rock and roll lived on his own time. Nights were his domain, and daylight hours were for rest. While the rest of the world turned with the sun, Elvis's world came alive under moonlight. And for young Lisa Marie, that meant growing up in a house where bedtime was flexible, laughter echoed after midnight, and there was always something unusual around the corner. Unlike most fathers, Elvis wasn't one for discipline or strict routines. He was warm, spontaneous, and eager to make Lisa's time with him feel magical. One evening, Lisa came bursting into her father's room, eyes wide with excitement and a tiny gap in her smile. She had just pulled out a loose tooth, and to her it was the most important thing in the world. "Daddy, Daddy!" she shouted, her voice filled with pride. Elvis, still groggy from sleep but always tender with her, smiled and reached out to inspect the tiny space. He gently cupped her face, tilted her chin, and said with a soft chuckle, "Well, look at that, baby. That tooth's gone, but a new one will grow in even stronger." There was no grand stage, no flashing lights, just a quiet, precious moment between a father and daughter, glowing with affection. Elvis knew exactly how to meet Lisa in her wonder-filled world. When she mentioned the tooth fairy, his eyes lit up with playful mischief. He nodded with a wink, assuring her that magic was very much alive at Graceland. It was these little exchanges, simple, heartfelt, and filled with imagination, that revealed the kind of father Elvis truly was. Not the stern, distant figure of celebrity legend, but a man who cherished every moment with his little girl and went out of his way to make even the smallest milestones feel unforgettable. Later that night, once the house had quieted and Lisa Marie had drifted off to sleep, Elvis made his move. With the hush of Graceland surrounding him and only the soft hum of the nighttime air for company, he crept into her room. The king, now playing the role of the tooth fairy, reached beneath her pillow and carefully retrieved the tiny tooth. In its place, he slid a crisp $10 bill, a small fortune for a child back then. It wasn't just a gift. It was a gesture from a father who wanted to keep the magic alive, to make a simple childhood tradition feel extraordinary. Then quietly and without fanfare, he stepped back into the shadows, never expecting the whirlwind that would follow. The next morning, Lisa shot out of bed as if she'd won the lottery. Her hands flew to the pillow, and her eyes lit up when she saw the money waiting for her. With an excited squeal, she bolted through the halls in search of her father, calling out, "Daddy, Daddy, the Tooth Fairy came!" Elvis, still waking from a deep slumber, grinned as she bounced at the edge of his bed, proudly waving the $10 bill in the air. "Can we go to the store? I want to get something with it," she asked, her voice bubbling with joy. Elvis, groggy but amused, told her they'd go soon. He just needed a moment to fully wake up. But Lisa's excitement couldn't be contained. She ran to the phone and called her mother, eager to share the magical news. "Mommy, the Tooth Fairy left me $10, she exclaimed. In her eyes, it was a dream come true, a special treat from a world where anything felt possible. And in that moment, all she wanted was to hop in the car with her dad and make the most of that treasure. She imagined the candy aisle, the toys, the joy of choosing something just for herself, with Elvis by her side. But on the other end of the line, a very different reaction was brewing. And that's where everything began to shift. The joyful chaos of the morning took an unexpected turn the moment Lisa picked up the phone to call her mother. Still beaming, she could hardly contain her excitement as she told Priscilla all about her Tooth Fairy surprise. "Guess what?" she chirped. "I got $10 under my pillow." On her end, Lisa saw nothing but magic and generosity. But for Priscilla, the news landed with more weight than Lisa could ever imagine. Her voice stiffened. That amount, she felt, wasn't just over the top. It was disruptive. She had her own way of parenting, her own sense of balance, and to her, this was a clear step over the line. It wasn't long before the phone at Graceland rang again, this time with a far less cheerful tone. Priscilla's words were pointed. She didn't yell, but the message was sharp and unmistakable. "You're spoiling her," she told Elvis. "I usually leave her a quarter, maybe 50 cents. I don't want you doing that." It was the kind of moment that flips the energy in the room, when a playful gesture suddenly feels like a misstep. The magic of the Tooth Fairy, it seemed, had sparked more than just a child's delight. It had ignited a simmering tension between two very different parenting styles. And then everything went quiet, just for a moment. That split second before a reaction, when the air thickens and you can almost hear the beat of someone's heart. Elvis, never one to take criticism lightly, especially when it came to Lisa, took a breath. The wheels were turning. He'd just done something he thought was thoughtful, even sweet. But now, with Priscilla's words hanging in the air, you could feel it coming, the crack of thunder just before the storm. What would he say? How would he answer? Everyone around him knew that when Elvis felt challenged, he never backed down quietly. Elvis didn't hesitate. The second he hung up the phone, the tension that had been quietly brewing beneath the surface erupted like a volcano. The man who had just lovingly slipped a $10 bill under his daughter's pillow was now pacing the room, voice rising with a rare mix of frustration and disbelief. "Let me tell you something," he snapped, his words sharp and filled with fire. "I don't know the damn going rate for a Tooth Fairy." It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about something deeper. To him, it felt like being told he wasn't allowed to show love in his own way. And that struck a nerve. He continued, barely stopping to breathe. "You give her what you want, and I'll give her what I want. That's the way it is." His voice echoed through the room, his southern drawl thick with emotion. For Elvis, the idea of being micromanaged when it came to Lisa was unacceptable. He didn't just see himself as a provider. He saw himself as her protector, her source of joy, the one who made her world sparkle even when it didn't follow anyone else's rules. To have that questioned, even by someone as close as Priscilla, felt like a personal offense. Elvis wasn't one to back down from a challenge. And in moments like this, his fire was unmistakable. His face was flushed, his movements quick and charged. He wasn't angry at Lisa, of course, never at her. This was about principle, about the clash between two visions of what it meant to raise a child, about control, and above all, about pride. It wasn't a planned confrontation, but once it began, there was no holding it back. The moment seared itself into memory, not just for Elvis, but for everyone nearby. Billy Smith, who had seen nearly every side of Elvis throughout the years, later recounted the scene with a mixture of awe and amusement. After the outburst, Elvis had vented to his cousin, still simmering, but with a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Can you believe that?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Over a tooth." It was classic Elvis. Explosive, intense, but never without a trace of humor. Billy knew then that this moment, like so many others at Graceland, would go down as one of those unforgettable tales that somehow blended real love, real anger, and a little bit of rock and roll-sized drama. Billy Smith couldn't help but laugh when he told the story years later. To him, it was one of those perfectly Elvis moments, equal parts heart and heat. He described it with a chuckle, recalling the way Elvis had stomped around, half angry, half amused, venting over something as small as a tooth. But that was just who Elvis was. Big reactions, big gestures, and a heart that beat fiercely for the people he loved. Billy saw it all not as a tantrum, but as a glimpse into Elvis's unfiltered soul. A man who never did anything halfway, whether it was giving a gift or standing his ground. What stood out most to Billy, even after all these years, was just how deeply Elvis adored Lisa Marie. There was a special softness in him that only surfaced when she was around. He may have been the king to the rest of the world, but to Lisa, he was just daddy. And that title meant more to him than any crown. Billy believed, without hesitation, that Elvis had every right to parent in the way that felt true to him. Rules didn't always apply in Graceland, and when it came to Lisa, Elvis followed his heart more than any parenting manual. That $10 under her pillow wasn't just a bill, it was love, wrapped in generosity and a little bit of sparkle. Years later, when Lisa passed far too soon, Billy and his wife Jo felt the weight of that loss in a deeply personal way. They hadn't seen her in decades, but memories of her laughter, her bold spirit, and her uncanny resemblance to her father lingered with them. In their quiet tribute, they didn't just mourn her, they celebrated her. They shared the funny stories, the tender moments, and the rare glimpses into a life lived under pressure and privilege. For Billy, that old tooth fairy tale became more than just a humorous memory. It was a reminder of how much Elvis loved, how fiercely he protected, and how even the smallest acts can echo through generations. Even for the most iconic figures in the world, parenting after divorce is rarely simple. Fame doesn't shield anyone from the emotional push and pull of raising a child in two different households. Elvis and Priscilla may have shared the spotlight once, but when it came to parenting Lisa Marie, they sometimes stood on very different ground. Co-parenting is a delicate dance, especially when both parents carry strong convictions, deep love, and in Elvis's case, a fiery sense of pride. Decisions that might seem small, like how much a tooth fairy should leave, can suddenly carry enormous emotional weight when filtered through years of separation, ego, and unresolved tension. Elvis loved Lisa with a depth that few could truly understand, but that love wasn't always gentle. It came wrapped in grand gestures, impulsive choices, and an instinct to protect her from anything, or anyone, he felt might dim her joy. At times, that meant clashing with those closest to him, even Priscilla. His emotions didn't simmer quietly, they blazed. And while his reactions may have startled those around him, they were often rooted in a genuine desire to do right by his daughter. He wasn't just reacting to a disagreement, he was defending his role as a father in a world that often demanded he be something else entirely. In the end, that night at Graceland wasn't really about a dollar amount, a missing tooth, or even a phone call. It was about something far more personal. It was about a man asserting his right to love, provide for, and parent his daughter in a way that felt true to who he was. It was about reclaiming a role that mattered more to him than the stage, the fame, or the music. That night wasn't just about a tooth. It was about being a father on his terms. If you enjoyed this story and want more rare glimpses behind the scenes of iconic moments like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. If this moment between Elvis and his daughter moved you or surprised you, give the video a like and share it with someone who would appreciate it too. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Elvis was right to stand his ground? Drop your opinions, memories, or questions down in the comments section. We read every one of them.